PU has become what NU used to be, and now that the tiers are finally starting to settle down, we're starting to see a lot of Pokemon in the PU tier that probably don't belong, Staraptor being chief among them. In previous generations, Staraptor was usually consigned to UUBL, but in this gen, Staraptor has fallen all the way down to PU. It just isn't as useful to have a Pokemon that can kill something almost guaranteed when that Pokemon is almost guaranteed to die itself. But besides that, a lot of Pokemon that you might expect to be down here are down here. Florges is a decent fairy type, but when anything can be a fairy type, its services are less valuable, and Florges doesn't really have an ability unto itself. So seeing Florges drop down here is a little bit sad, but not too surprising, to be honest. With Terra, Florges can actually get some coverage, which is really cool. But the question is, what coverage are you going to run on Florges? At the beginning of making this team, had Terra Ground on Florges. Terra Ground lets it one-shot Galarian Slowbro after a Calm Mind, and also lets it hit other rock or fire types like Colossal. Rock types, of course, aren't a problem, but fire types are a problem. Colossal, Arcanine, things like that. So that's really cool to have the ground to hit the poisons, the steels, the fires, all in one. That would otherwise be a problem for Florges. But then as I was testing the team, trying to get it to work, switching out Mons and whatever, there was a big problem standing in the way of Florges, and that problem was actually on my team as well, and that's Bronzong. Bronzong really doesn't let Florges do what it wants to do in any meaningful way. Maybe if it had Flash Cannon and you can Calm Mind up on it, then it's going to be a problem for the Bronzong, but if it's got Heavy Slam, it's going to be doing a lot of damage even after you've Terra'd. And they all run Levitate. If they don't run Levitate, it's a bad Bronzong set. So then I realized I could still hit Bronzong, and I could hit Galarian Slowbro all in one with Terra Dark. So this Florges is actually a Terra Dark Florges with Terra Blast, Moonblast, Synthesis, and Calm Mind. It's a little bit memey of a set, but it is effective in doing what it wants to do, which is check its counters. The Terra Dark is actually nice as well because this tier has things like Whimsicott and Grimmsnarl, both of which can Prankster Encore you. And with the Terra, you are no longer able to be Prankster Encored. So that allows you to set up a little more safely against Pokemon like that. Grafaiai is still a little bit annoying in the tier as well, just because it's a poison type that wants to come in on you. And since we're no longer Terra Ground, we can't one-shot it necessarily. But it still is not going to appreciate a Terra Dark, Terra Blast. But usually, frankly, I would prefer to switch out. I'm not the most familiar with PU, or at least I wasn't when I was first building this team. But I learned a lot when I was building the team, and I think that what I learned should maybe, there's some rules that sort of help when you are getting into the tier. When I first started playing PU a couple weeks ago with this team, I was losing a lot of games, and I didn't really understand what I needed to have on my team. So the first thing to do is just to play a lot of games, I think, and see what's ran in the tier. Because I can play decently the game of Pokemon, but if I don't know what is being ran in a tier, then I won't know what I am required to have on my team. And also, I won't necessarily know the optimal plays. And we'll see in a bit some Pokemon that actually give this team a lot of problems, and how you can learn to deal with those Pokemon that give you lots of problems. My opponent's team here is threatening, but is not necessarily something that's particularly emblematic or representative of the PU tier. Sandslash, you don't usually see. It is an okay spinner, but Alolan Sandslash is a lot more common. Vikavolt is common for webs, but you never see Zapkin on Vikavolt, of course. Bruxis is a Pokemon I feel like you could see more often. It just is a problem that the premier physical wall is Bronzong, so you're going to have to click Wave Crash or Flip Turn, which isn't a lot of value overall. And then Gastrodon is everywhere as well, and when I have Bronzong plus Gastrodon, you never know if you're supposed to click Flip Turn, or Wave Crash or Psychic Fangs, right? So you have to click Crunch at that point. It is not a great situation to be in. I still think the Bruxish could maybe put in some work, and maybe even a Terra Dark Bruxish would be potentially strong, but you're not going to see it that much despite it being an extremely powerful Pokemon because of what's being ran in the tier. So I just got a few replays today that we're going to have in the background while I talk about the state of PU. You can see here that my opponent has a pretty nice balanced build here. They've got Colossal for Spin and potentially Braviary for Defog. Got a Bulky Water and Melodic. I've seen a few Melodics. I'm not the biggest fan of them. I've seen Melodics run Terra Blast Grass to bust through Gastrodon as a lure. And that is sort of nice, I'm not going to lie. But it does force you to commit to the Terra, which I'm not the biggest fan of either. Melodic is okay otherwise as a Bulky Water because it does be bulky against a lot of opponents, and as opposed to Gastrodon, it doesn't have a 4x weakness. But Gastrodon is just always coming in. And in fact, a lot of times you get into Gastrodon versus Gastrodon matchups. You can see here the Melodic doesn't even one-shot the Gastrodon. Now that I've seen that, I can decide, do I want to stay in and just sack, or do I want to switch out? I decided that I was going to stay in and sack it because I knew my Staraptor now is going to one-shot the Melodic. So all I have to do is call out the Colossal one time and then we're good to go. Maybe I can defog if it wants to. Now this Rotom here is Rotom Heat. I've gone back and forth on if it should be Rotom Heat or Rotom Mow. I personally like Rotom Heat a lot better, just first typing. But in this particular tier, Rotom Mow actually feels like it might be better because of Gastrodon. So when I have Rotom Mow, the Gastrodon user can't necessarily go in freely because if I go for Leaf Storm, they die. And so they can't just come in on my Rotom. But Rotom Heat rather, Gastrodon just comes in for free. What are you supposed to do to me? To be fair, a lot of Gastrodon can't actually touch Rotom either, because the most standard Gastrodon, if I'm not mistaken, is Ice Beam Earth Power plus a Hazard and then Recover. So you do see sometimes Clear Smog, you do see sometimes Scald, but there's so many other Gastrodons running in a tier, and you do really want to have Ice Beam for things like Altaria, the grass types, Staraptor even, just so you can get the kill. That Scald or other water moves are not really that common on Gastrodon in my experience. And so if they can't really touch you, then that's fine. Now this particular Rotom, the other thing that I've really wiffle-waffled on is, do I want to have Pain Split or do I want to have Nasty Plot? In the beginning of the generation, Rotom didn't even get Pain Split, and people were bemoaning that, like, oh no, it's so terrible, it's such a nerf for Rotom. But I feel like a lot of times Rotoms don't even want to have Pain Split, they'd rather have Nasty Plot. And this is a particular Rotom that I don't really think, like, it could go either way. It doesn't have to have Pain Split, but Pain Split can be useful in certain situations. So I currently have Pain Split on it just to give my team a bit more longevity. But if I had Nasty Plot and they went into Gastrodon and they didn't have Clear Smog and they didn't have a water move, then maybe I could set up on it. But even that would be just an exercise in futility. They're going to have Recover. I'm going to be dropping my special attack every time I attack them. It's just not fun. It'd be much easier if I had a Rotom Mow on my team. But having that fire resist for like things like Arcanine, when you see my team has no other fire resists, is pretty nice. So that's why we're going with Rotom Heat. It just changes the way you have to play against certain opponents. Inteleon is in this tier, which is pretty scary, but only, again, if you let the Terra Blast Grass catch you off guard. And so mileage may vary depending on how you or your opponent play in that particular matchup. Decidueye is an interesting Pokemon. Blocks Rapid Spin, so you can use it like in conjunction with webs or whatever. It has Poltergeist, which is extremely strong. Yeah, they crit me, which is extremely lucky, and I triple Axle dodge, so nice luck. But I was using Decidueye at the beginning, and I'm not the biggest fan of it. I wasn't using Poltergeist, I was using knockoff Shadow Ball as sort of a mixed attacker. I don't think that's the best set. I much prefer, I think, the Poltergeist, just because Poltergeist is so strong. But having knockoff utility in theory would be nice, and having Shadow Ball to deal with Bronzong on the special side when it's such a physically tanky Pokemon is sort of nice. So this is why I feel like could get something going. It's just not really good right now, in my opinion. No, but that's just me. Let's talk about Staraptor now. Staraptor is sort of running the tier in the sense that it forces certain speed tiers and it forces you to have an answer to it on your team. If you don't have an answer to it on your team, then when I bring out my Staraptor, I'm going to get a kill. There are certain Pokemon that Staraptor will probably be able to one-shot. Maybe it's a close one-shot, but not quite with certain Pokemon. But now here, Ice Beam is so super obvious. But if I bring it in on like Inteleon, I'm a Scarf Staraptor. That Inteleon will die. Now you're forced to go into your Golem. If Golem can't really take that hit for whatever reason, then you're in a world of hurt. Having a good Defogger or Rapid Spinner while you have Staraptor, I think, is pretty important. I have Hitmontop, which I actually am not the biggest fan of. I feel like that's something on this team that could definitely change, just because I felt it was often difficult to get the spin off. But as you can see here, something dies on their team. They go Golem, and it's going to get two-shot. So that's not that big of a deal. And then, so as long as I can bring it in and force pressure, then we're okay. And that's sort of the overwhelming presence that Staraptor brings to the tier. At the beginning, when I was first testing this team out, I had a Scarf Flamigo. Actually, it was not Scarf Flamigo. It was a Black Belt Flamigo, the Bluff Scarf, and then I had Scarf Delphox. And the Scarf Delphox was, it was okay. But Flamigo, even if it had been Scarfed, it would still be outran by Staraptor. And the Staraptor Scarf speed tier is just really oppressive. So I don't know how I feel about Staraptor, but I do lean towards more. I wish it was sort of banned, just because then if I open up other options, then we could maybe have we could have more Flamigos. We could have more other Pokemon that are Scarfed, like even Scarf Pissimian or something, right? All of those Scarfers are getting outran by Scarf Flamigo. So there's no point running any of those Pokemon when I can just bring out something that's the fastest guy on the field and has enough power, because a lot of Scarfers are weak, right? But Scarf Staraptor is in no way, shape, or form weak. So, but on the other hand, if it's in a tier, you sort of got to use it, right? I'm not going to just say, oh, it's a cheap mon, and not use it. Now we can use it. And it definitely gets me a lot of wins as a result. Even resists aren't really resists when it's Terraflying Staraptor. I think technically you could be other Terrors as well, not just Terraflying, but it is probably the strongest option. Hitmonchan, not a fan of that. I think Hitmontop is generally better just because it has Intimidate. That's really the only reason why. Here, this endgame is actually interesting. This is one of those examples where is Pain Split better or is Nasty Plot better? If I had Nasty Plot here, then I could +2 Overheat. But I don't, so I have Pain Split instead, and that still gets me where I need to be in the end, where I can one-shot with Overheat. And we'll just skip a couple turns. But if I had gone for Overheat before, it would have killed, and Hitmonchan has some decent Spadef, then I'd be in a really bad position. So I do think that maybe Nasty Plot over Pain Split might be preferable on Rotom at the moment. Now this team has a couple of Pokemon on it that I do want to talk about. Going back to this Rotom Heat, I'm not a Rotom Mo, and I am going to struggle with the ground types, and Golurk is no exception. It has Stone Edge, potentially. It has Poltergeist, which is super annoying. And so I have to learn how to play around those threats. You can't just say, well, I have it on my team. It'll deal with it. How does it deal with it? what moves are you going to click at a certain time. Braviary is another Pokemon that you have to learn what it does in the tier. I got destroyed by this Pokemon so many times. It's super annoying in this tier. They always go for Agility turn 1, and then they always go for Terrifier turn 2. If I had gone into Bronzong, they would have Terrified and blown me away. So you always go into the Rotom Heat, then they go for the Terrifier to resist, and now they are a Fire type. Then you can go into Gastrodon and kill them with Earth Power. If they want to switch out, that's fine, because then they're no longer +2 speed. So that's how I learned how to deal with those guys. As you can see here, we outspeed this Rotom here, which is useful. And actually, I think since they were Choice Scarf, they could have just killed me there, and that would have been better. But then I would have just gone Florges. Pain Split here is nice, because I can get some health back from Golurk and then kill it. Golurk, if it gets a lot of Poltergeists off, is super annoying. So you have to watch out for that. But if you spam Will-O-Wisp on the ground types as they come in, it does, in the long game, usually help you out. I think they should always have set up if they had that, instead of going for Moonblast against my Rotom. It wasn't really doing anything otherwise. The Bronzong versus Hitmontop dynamic is really interesting. It's something I've ran into multiple times, both on the Hitmontop side and on the Bronzong side. A lot of times these Bronzongs will go for Rocky Helmet and issue some kind of recovery. Maybe they have a Wish Fortress or something to help them out. If they have Rocky Helmet, your Hitmontop is taking lots of chip, and usually your Hitmontops want to run heavy duty boots so they can do their spin job better, and then they're just going to get chipped down over time. And so I feel like usually my Bronzong loses to opposing Hitmontops, but my Hitmontop always loses to opposing Bronzongs because they're always the max defense Rocky Helmet. So, not sure how I feel about that. But I do like having leftovers on Bronzong with Protect. Like as you can see here, this Rotom goes for Trick, and I'm able to scout that. Having the ability to scout that kind of thing is really nice. This is another hallmark of an unhealthy metagame, when you have to force speed ties. Sometimes you go for them, sometimes you don't have to. In this situation, I did not need to. I could just switch out, go into Bronzong, and then force them to go into their Rotom. Here I just Protect because I want to get back some health, and I figure it may not switch out anyway because they're gonna take Stealth Rock again, but we can just get leftovers and that's fine. Since they're blocked in, so they're not gonna set up or anything. So I don't like the fact that there are so many Scarf Staraptors running around. Once again, we know that they're locked in, so we can just Protect. And that sort of shows the usefulness of having Protect leftovers Bronzong here. I do really like this Bronzong set for its ability to scout, because Shadow Ball I don't think is a good move on this ever. I don't think you should be running that, but it allows my Staraptor to come in, and then I just sweep at that point, because now I'm Scarf, and Rotom, which is traditionally a decently fast Scarfer, nope, Staraptor's still faster. And I don't know about Staraptor. It's so good in the tier. Once again, we're running into another Braviary, and it's going to do the same things they always do. Bronzong, you can Protect on the Ambipom because Ambipom isn't really doing anything in terms of setup. If we had Body Press, we'd be able to punish the Ambipom a lot better. But it is what it is. Earthquake, let's talk about Earthquake. So Bronzong, I don't think a lot of them run Earthquake. I do like Earthquake a lot. It punishes things like Colossal and other electric types. But I don't know, it just feels like the other options that you have, like Psychic Noise or whatever, I just never felt like they were getting enough mileage. If I had something like Toxic, I would put that on it over Earthquake. But I have caught a few Mons with the Earthquake that they stayed in on me thinking that they were going to live a hit, and then I Earthquaked and then they died. So I think the Earthquake actually has a place on Bronzong. Graphite would be another example. Maybe it's not in range of Heavy Slam, but it is in range of Earthquake. And another Pokemon would be, whatchamacallit? Skuntank. Skuntank, if you can live the knockoff from Skuntank and they're in range of the Earthquake or whatever, you can go for that as well. So it's not a bad option. I sort of like having Earthquake as a 4th move on the Zong. Scrafty is struggling to do much in the tier, which is hilarious because it really is a good Pokemon. But it has to struggle with Intimidate, Hitmontop, Staraptor, Flamigo, and all the other fighting types. There's both Tauroses down here, water and fire, and you're gonna have to deal with those. Bronzong, of course, being the physical wall, is good for you because you're going to beat it with knockoff or whatever. But there's enough fairy types, intimidate Pokemon down here, and flying types that it just isn't gonna get you very far. Which is sort of funny because you know, Scrafty is quite a good Pokemon. Here we always make the play where we go Rotom because it forces them into this bad situation. And here we can just sack the Bronzong if we want to. They actually go for Psychic again, so I don't know if they're locked in or anything. But it's really nice because my opponent has no ground type, which is crazy when there's so many good ground types in the tier. Frankly, there are so many good ground types in PU that I wouldn't be surprised if a bunch of them fall down to ZU. Like, I think we might see Mudsdale fall down to ZU next shifts, just because I can use Gastrodon, I can use Rhydon even, technically. Sandaconda's down here, and Sandaconda is probably going to fall down because it doesn't really have much to do. And so that, at the end of the day, I think gets at one of the main things I wanted to talk about, the PU tier. Now that things have fallen down and we're starting to see Rotom Heat down here, Staraptor down here, even Bronzong has been a higher tier Pokemon usually. We're starting to see the usefulness of the lower tier Pokemon called into question. And the ZU tier is going to become really crowded because the ZU tier is the bottom, you can't go any lower than that. But there's so many Pokemon of a specific type. There's like 20 fighting types, there's tons of ground types, there's even a decent chunk of fairy types, to the point where there's a lot of competition for slots. And so Pokemon that have traditionally been good, like Scrafty, probably going to fall down to the ZU tier. And there's going to be a lot of ZU Mons. Like even a Tauros Fire might fall down, or because if Tauros Water is better than Tauros Fire, and both of them are struggling against Scarf Staraptor, then nobody's going to be running them, and they're going to fall down, which is super rough. So I sort of wish that there were some way to play the Smogon metagame without having to deal with tier shifts. That's a conversation for another video. But if we had rotating Pokemon, where certain Pokemon were legal in certain seasons or something, then we could see different Pokemon be best in slot. Tatsugiri here is an interesting pick. Obviously, it's here is a Rapid Spinner. It also has Storm Drain. And it's not a bad Pokemon, for sure, because you do want to have Rapid Spin. It has decent speed and whatever. Hitmontop is actually a great switch into Golurk once it's burned, because you get the Intimidate boost, you get the attack drop, and I can just triple Axle. And a lot of times people don't respect the triple Axle on Hitmontop. Frankly, I don't know how many Pokemon run, or how many Hitmontops run triple Axle, but I do think it's a good thing to run. Once again, Staraptor claiming Hitmontop's life, which is why I think Hitmontop is not maybe the best spinner, to be honest. Here, Will-O-Wisp instead of Volt Switching, just because I want to try to catch the Rhydon. Here they missed Draco Meteor, which is unfortunate, I guess, but it doesn't really change too much, I don't think. Except for now they get to Nasty Plot and be at +2 instead of neutral, which is what they would have been. And then my opponent gets way too greedy, and then we get a nasty crit there. So I don't think they should have done that. I think they should have just gone for Draco twice. Sceptile is an interesting Pokemon. You've got to keep your Bronzong healthy, because these are always physical with Unburden, except for when they're not. I have run into a Leech Seed one, but I don't think that's a good set at all. This is an interesting turn. If I had gone for Earthquake here, this Toxtricity would have died in one hit. But I wanted to save the Bronzong for Sceptile, and I didn't want to get weakened by the Overdrive or whatever I wanted to go for. So again, if I'd gone for Earthquake, this Toxtricity would just straight up just been dead. But I had to keep it healthy for the Sceptile, Staraptor, and even Rhydon to a lesser extent. This was definitely not a good play. I should have just gone back into Bronzong, bit the bullet, and then taken the hit. What I should have did, but I was scared of losing to the Sceptile. What you gonna do? And frankly, my opponent should not have boom bursted there. They should have gone for the overdrive. It would have done more damage, I believe. 48%, boom burst at 42. So they would have done a little more damage, and I think that would have been a 2-shot. You can see now that my Bronzong is weakened, Staraptor is going to be an issue here. And so what we're going to have to do is actually go for the dreaded Staraptor speed tie at the end of the day, if I'm not careful. So we do have Rotom that can take a hit. That is one of the main reasons why I do like Rotom. Besides the fire resist, which we did mention previously, Rotom eats better than eats better than Rotom Mow because it's neutral on Rotom Mow because of the grass typing. And so this is a better check to the Staraptor, technically. That's only technically, because if you think about it, the Staraptor can always go for Double Edge. Staraptors always run Double Edge. Here this should probably not have gone for another Swords Dance, because I can Earthquake or Heavy Slam or do any number of things. Imagine if I had Flash Cannon. Here I know that they're not going to set up again. I can just protect. And after all of that, they actually, even with the burn, they still they KO me, which is sort of crazy. But it doesn't matter because Staraptor just comes out and I can win. And I do have to sort of risk the speed tie against their own Staraptor, but that is what this tier has come down to at this point. And fortunately for me, I do pick up the KO here. So I don't think it would have come down to this if I'd have just gone for Earthquake. And I think trusting my gut would have. I did trust my gut. My gut said I need to keep the Bronzong healthy for the other guys. But if I'd have just been clicking buttons, then I would have just clicked Earthquake, and the Toxtricity wouldn't have been able to punch down my Bronzong to the point where I needed to win that speed tie. So far, we haven't seen Florges do too much in this video, and so we're going to correct that here. This guy runs up with Stall, and one of the things you notice about this Stall team, which is somewhat unusual, is that they don't actually have any Steel type. So it's actually a really bad Stall team, because sure, they have a Wo-Chien, which is annoying at this part of the ladder, but unless I'm mistaken, they don't have a single status absorber. And if I had any Pokemon with Toxic, or if I had Toxic Spikes, they would just get entirely whittled down by Toxic. Like, imagine if Umbreon were facing this team or something. I would just Toxic everything, and they'd all be dead. But aside from not having a Steel type to absorb Toxic, they also don't have anything to deal with Florges. And we will see that in a second. This is an interesting example of the Tatsugiri-Gastrodon interaction. If you give Gastrodon a boost, it actually does scare out the Tatsu. There, I didn't go for Earth Power, I went for Ice Beam in case they went Wo-Chien. Screamtail is not that good of a Pokemon in this tier. And that's not to say that Screamtail isn't a good Pokemon. Again, this is another example of a good Pokemon that's in the wrong tier for it. When Bronzong has like 60% usage or whatever the heck it is, Screamtail is never going to do anything. It has no coverage for the Bronzong, and it doesn't threaten the Bronzong. So the Bronzong gets up its hazards, it can go for attacks against the Screamtail, do whatever the heck it wants. And Screamtail, once again, is pretty unviable as a result. Even though you can use Screamtail in any of the above tiers, you can use a Know-You, and Screamtail will put in work. But because Bronzong is in this tier and has such high usage, it's not going to put in work. Yeah, they Encore me, and I think they realized at this point their mistake, because I don't care about going for Calm Mind again. That was the whole point. You don't have any unaware Pokemon, you don't have any Steel types, you don't have any Poison types. And so I don't even have to Terror or anything like that. And at this point, all they can hope for is to try to boost up alongside me, and then win the 1v1, which is not probably going to happen. And as we'll see, it definitely does not happen. So I think that this Stall team is pretty poorly constructed. it needs to have a steel or poison at the very least to not only deal with Florges, because, I mean, clearly you can see it doesn't win this interaction, but also because you don't want to get toxic to everyone. So here we crit the Florges, which it was going to happen eventually. One of us was going to crit each other. But I had a Bronzong that I could go into after the fact, and they don't have anything that they can go into. This just one-shots their entire team at this point. So overall, I don't think Florges is bad in the tier, but I think it has to be able to have teammates that are going to check its counters, or it needs to have an appropriate Terra type. And so I think Terra Blast Dark is a weird pick, but it's actually sort of a meta pick in the sense that it helps you to beat Bronzong, which is the premier steel type that's going to be coming in on you, helps save you from Encore and things like that. But overall, I don't think the Florges is that strong compared to some other options you can run. But it's not bad. Anyway, overall, I think PU is scary right now. You have to learn what's actually relevant, because there's so many Pokemon in the PU tier that would have been NU or RU or even UU last generation, and they're not even that good in this tier because of what's relevant. So one of the things I learned by learning PU is when you go into a tier, the first thing to do is figure out what's good in the tier and then learn how your guys stack up against those guys, and then change the move sets accordingly so that you can respond. Anyway, I wanted to go over some of these replays and talk about my thoughts about PU, and that'll be it for today. I'll catch you guys next time.